Thank you, Logan, for those good songs, and thank you again for being here today with us, a part of our worship service here at the North End Church of Christ. This morning's lesson, I hope, is going to be beneficial for you, encouraging and enlightening at the same time. We're going to take a look at Matthew chapter 5 and verse 38 through 48 today. That's taken from the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus offered a sermon there, and Jesus was trying to make an impact on the listeners of his audience at that time, that there's a new sheriff in town and things are going to change, and there's a shift in attitude is what he was shooting for here with some of that message. But the message of the day, I've titled it, Going the Extra Mile. We're going to talk about that in some detail as to what that means and what Jesus was referring to when he asked us to go the extra mile. Read along with me, if you will. Our text of the day is Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. Read along with me. I'll have it here. I hope that you're also maybe following along in your Bibles as well. Matthew 5 and verse 38 begins by saying, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you to resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you, take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect." Jesus is laying out some heavy stuff here, isn't he? He's giving them and us today a glimpse of what it looks like to go the extra mile. That's the point of our lesson this morning. We're going to dissect that and look at that a little deeper and more involved. Because we in our culture today, I'll speak for myself, I don't really use that terminology much. We do when we are comparing things or something like that, but we don't really understand the concept behind what was happening. Just for a few moments, I'd like for you to consider with me some of what it meant to go the extra mile in Bible times. We'll start there and kind of work our way through this lesson with that. So what did he mean? Jesus knew, and those who were hearing him at that time knew exactly what he was talking about. This idea of compelling somebody to go the extra mile. This word compel, once again, another word that we don't use a lot today, but it just simply means to press into service or force someone into doing a task. So they were compelled to go the extra mile, or to go a mile, and that's what we'll look at here in a moment. They were forced into service. And what we mean by that is, in New Testament days, the Roman soldiers were authorized to press into service or compel someone, anybody who's available, to transport anything they wanted hauled. For an example, we got a pile of wood over here. We need this pile of wood taken up the hill. So you and you and you up here now and haul this wood away. That's what they would do. They would force you to haul that wood. Now the interesting thing is they could only legally compel someone to haul something 1 mile. So that 1 mile was a forced thing. You had no choice. The soldiers are standing over you, and they say, grab this heavy item and take it a mile. And then they would take it a mile. If they needed to go further, they would compel somebody else. Okay, you back there, you over there, and you take it the rest of the way. So they would force labor onto people. That's this idea of compelling someone, forcing someone to go a mile. You're familiar probably with an instance of this, and this is found in Matthew chapter 27 in verse 32 with Simon the Cyrene, who, after Jesus was brutally beaten, humiliated, attacked, scourged, all the things that happened, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name, and him they compelled to bear his cross. So in other words, Jesus is struggling to carry this cross after going through a scourging. He's about on life support as it is. So he's barely making it. He can't carry this big, clumsy cross, which had to have weighed who knows how much. You can imagine what 2 big timbers would weigh. And so they said, okay, he can't carry it. You take it. You're Simon. You take it now. So Simon then carries it the rest of the way. So he was compelled by the soldiers to carry that load for Jesus. So what we're going to do here, this next point, is to compare what he means by this 1 mile versus the 2nd mile. Jesus says he requires us to go the extra mile. Well, wait a minute. What's that? You mean it would be similar to them taking a big load of wood or whatever might be that they're having to haul, and the guards saying you got to go a mile, and then they're taking another mile. Nobody would do that. That's crazy. You only do what you have to do, especially under those conditions. Well, this 1st mile is a mile that is for those who claim to be Christians but have this 1st mile attitude, I'm going to call it. A 1st mile attitude. And so if you're a Christian today and you're taking the attitude that they were taking toward this 1st mile, in other words, it's something I'm forced to do, then a Christian today would ask the questions of, well, why should I have to do more? Why do I have to go any further? Or a 1st mile attitude person would say, well, how many services do I have to attend? I was here this morning. You mean there's more? Oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not doing that. That's this 1st mile attitude, which means I'm only going to do what I'm forced to do. That's the Christian who might have a 1st mile attitude. That Christian might say this. Well, how much do I have to give? You mean I have to give more? Well, that's ridiculous. I'm not giving any more. Too bad. Forget it. I'm not doing it. I did my part. I put my $5 in. You want more? Get it someplace else. That's this 1st mile sort of an attitude. No, I'm going to do only what I have to do, the bare minimum. How much work do I really have to do here in this congregation, this church? This is ridiculous. I'm not doing any more than what I have to do. I'm compelled to go the 1 mile. That's it. That's this attitude that some Christians have. Do I have to come back for another service today? This is ridiculous. I was here once. What's the problem? I'm compelled to do the 1 service. That's it. That's all you're going to get out of me. That's the attitude of the 1st mile Christians. Those are those who raise such questions. Those that raise such questions don't understand really what service to God is all about. And that's what Jesus is trying to open our minds to. And those, of course, that he was preaching to that day, the same thing. They are the ones that are trying to get away with as little as possible. What's the least I can do and still be acceptable to God? I'm going to do the bare minimum. and I want to slide in on the absolute least that I have to put forth. That's the first mile sort of an attitude. In other words, if you're carrying lumber for a Roman soldier, you're only going to go what you have to do. Well, we have Christians that do the same thing. They only really do what they have to do. And anything above that, count me out. Is that you? Well, this second mile is what Jesus is speaking of. He's speaking about those that will go beyond what's required of a Christian. Somebody who is willing to take that next step. This is the difficult mile. But it's a mile of grace and mercy and love. It's the mile that says, I know I've done what I have to do, but I'm willing to go further. I'm going to go more. I'm going to take this. Those who travel this second mile will have the attitude of, what more can I do? Rather than the first mile person who says, what's the least I have to do and get by with it? Just to keep you off my back and to keep the preacher from hollering at me. What's the least I have to do? The second mile Christian is the one who says, what more can I do? What else needs to be done? What else can I do? How much more can I do? That's the attitude that Jesus is trying to get them and us to see. We are to be that second mile attitude. We find that second mile attitude in our verse here in 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding. And that word abounding there means overflowing in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. That's the second mile that Jesus speaks of. And today, I'd like to take our verse that we read, those 10 verses, and we'll break that down and look at some specifics about this second mile attitude that Jesus is requiring of us as followers of His. The first one that we'll look at here is this concept of turning the other cheek. And that's part of our verse here. We see that here. But really, Jesus is saying this is a changing of our attitudes. In other words, is He saying we should go around and be abused? Or just walk around and let people bam, 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 beat on us? No. But what He's saying is when that does happen to us, what's your attitude towards that? He's trying to get them and us to change our attitude, to change how we think about that. In Bible days, a slap on the face would have been an insult. Well, we today, we don't necessarily go around hitting people usually to insult them. We do that with a text or on Facebook or over the phone somehow. I'm going to insult someone and I'm going to do it digitally so that I don't have to hear the retaliation or have to smack this person. In those days, they were a little more hands-on, as you see. If anyone slaps you, Jesus said, on the right cheek, then turn to him the left. What's He saying? This is an attitude change. I'm not going to retaliate in that situation. I'm not going to be abused. I'm not going to allow someone just to abuse me for the sake of abusing me. But at the same time, I'm going to change my attitude towards this, and I'm not even really going to retaliate. If you've heard it said, an eye for a tooth for a tooth. In other words, you poke my eye out, I'm going to poke yours. That was once said, but Jesus is changing the rules. He's changing how this works. But I say to you, not to resist an evil person. Whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the also. Don't retaliate as we would normally do. That easy to do? Oh, no. Very difficult to do. But this is the second mile. This is going extra. This is doing what Jesus wants us to do, which is go the extra mile. Go that second mile. And not just simply what you have to do. We find that concept, and this concept of turning the other cheek, throughout the Bible. In one verse in particular, we find in Romans chapter 12 and verse 14 through 18. Paul says, "Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men." There are times it's not possible. There are people in our world that are just completely unreasonable, and they don't even care to get along. Those are situations where you can't help it. But as much as you can, as much as possible, and as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. You see, that's this concept of going the extra mile. You willing to go the extra mile that Jesus required? Or are you the type of the 1 mile attitude person that says, wait a minute, time out, I'm not going any further. This is too much. Forget it. Count me out. Jesus is imploring you, imploring me to be that second mile attitude person. The next section in our lesson is taken from verse 40, which when Jesus says, if anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him also have your cloak also. So that means I should just walk around and let the world just abuse me? No. Certainly not what he's saying. But what he is saying is, it's having an attitude of peace rather than an attitude of going to war all the time. There are times where we just step back and say, whatever happens, happens. God's going to take care of me. I know what's going to happen. It's going to be okay. Now, there are times where we have to defend ourselves. No question about that. But too often, anything that happens, we're going to go into war. You step on my toes in the least little bit, brother, you have stepped on it now. You have officially cooked your goose, because I'm going to battle this till the dying breath. That's not the attitude that Jesus is asking us to do. He's saying, back away from that. Don't attack when you're being attacked. Philippians chapter 2 and verse 3 refers to this. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. What's he saying? It's an attitude shift, isn't it? It's a completely different attitude than what we're used to having. This second mile is a difficult mile, isn't it? It's a difficult road. It's a difficult way. Jesus is imploring us through this sermon, through his Sermon on the Mount today, change your attitude towards these things. Be the peacemaker rather than the pot stirrer. Be the guy who says, we're going to just chill out here. We're not going to go any further with this. Whatever happens, happens. Rather than the one who, now you've done it. We're going to war now, brother. You see the attitude change that Jesus is trying to get us to see? That's the second mile that he speaks of. The next point that he talks about here in verse 42 says, give him to who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. Wait a minute. The 1 mile person says, I'm going to do what I have to do. I'll pay my taxes. And beyond that, that's it. But the generosity is what Jesus is trying to get us to see. That those who are going the 2nd mile are those who are willing, yes, pay your taxes, do the minimum, but also if someone needs more, you're there. You're there and willing and ready to be generous in these opportunities. You see how much of a leap that 2nd mile can be? Wait a minute. Can't they get it on their own? Hey, I worked hard for this and they ain't getting it. Forget it. I'm not giving it to them. That's the 1st mile attitude person. The 2nd mile attitude is the one that Jesus speaks of, who is doing your minimum, yes, do what you have to do, but also going the extra yard, going the extra mile, willing to go beyond what is required. Proverbs 19 says it this way: he who has pity on the poor lends to God, and he will pay back what he's given. God's going to take care of you. If you have this 2nd mile attitude, God's going to provide for you. But he says, have that 2nd mile attitude. Luke chapter 6 and verse 38 says, give, and it'll be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. You ever buy a bag of potato chips, and it's that big, and you open it up, and there's this much potato chips in it? It's the same thing. He's saying, we're going the opposite of that. We're going to give to the point that it's full and running over. And we're going to shake it so that it settles, so that we can add more to it. Even than that. This 2nd mile, brothers, sisters, friends, is a tough mile. But it's what Jesus requires of his followers. And then we have probably one of the toughest things that we can ever do. Love your enemies. What's he mean by that? What does he mean, love your enemies? And we find that here from verse 43 of our text. You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemies. But I say to you, things have changed. Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who pray for you and spitefully usually persecute you. Why? Here's why. That you may be sons of your heavenly Father. If you claim to be a child of God, you are the 2nd mile person. You're the one who is willing to extend beyond what is required. You're the one who's willing to love their enemies. This love is agape love, which is, this definition is goodwill toward your enemies. A sincere interest in the welfare of that other person. That's the kind of love. It's not necessarily the kind of love that you have to invite your enemies to Thanksgiving dinner, but it is the kind of love that you have an interest in their well-being. You care about them. You're willing to provide. Anyone can love the loving, but it takes a person going the 2nd mile to love your enemies. That's what we're called and required to do. Romans chapter 12 says it this way. Therefore, and here's this agape kind of love. If your enemy's hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you'll heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That phrase there, heaping coals of fire on their head, we sometimes misunderstand. And I think that is something worth looking into. It's really your act of kindness will bring shame on those and they'll change their ways. That's the hope that this will do. It'll heap coals of fire on them, meaning they'll recognize what they're doing is wrong and change their behavior with that. Loving your enemies, friends, is that second mile. But that's what we're called to do. Jesus has called us to do that. Going the extra mile involves a lot of things. And in this particular context of what we've looked at here today, it's turning the other cheek, being the peacemaker, being generous, and loving your enemies. Are you the first mile attitude kind of a person, or the second mile attitude person? The first mile, that's the guy who just says, whatever I have to do, and that's all I'm doing. The second mile person is the one that Jesus is calling me and you to be today. We find that from Matthew 5 and verse 38. So what if you did all that? All right? You did all those four things that Jesus spoke about. You're generous. You love your neighbor. You take care of everybody. You go the extra mile. What then? Well, this is an interesting verse as we conclude this morning. Luke 17 and verse 10 says, "So likewise, when you have done all those things which you are commanded, say, we are unprofitable servants. We've done what our duty was to do." If you are the second mile person, great. But you know what? You're just simply doing what you're supposed to do. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing in the first place by doing that second mile. Too often, we have that first mile attitude, especially when it comes to something that you're going to require of me. My time, my money, my energy, my help. Oh no, forget it. Jesus is imploring you today to change your attitude towards that second mile. Are you willing to do that today? Maybe you're here today and you're not a member of the Lord's church. Won't you be a part of the family of God today? Or maybe you sit here and you've listened to me yammer for 30 minutes here and you say to yourself, he's got something here. And I'm the first mile guy. I'm simply going to do the bare necessities. And I need to change. Maybe you need prayer on your behalf in that regard. And if that's the case, let us help you right now as we stand and as we sing.